We're live.
Thing.
We're live.
That's
We're
live.
live.
Hi, everybody. My name's Sean Waters. This is a wisdom workshop, which is my ongoing project of exploring real world practical philosophy. Sabarna. This is Cori Wong. Cori, how long have we been friends?
For a really long time, but Sean, I gotta stop. I hear an echo, which might be. Is that me? Do you hear an echo?
Chris. Let me see if I put on my.
Is it the Substack on your computer?
Maybe. I don't think so.
You're not hearing that?
I'm not.
Chris, I don't know you. Do you hear an echo? Does it sound okay?
Sabarna, Chris, does it
Now,
sound all right? No? Sounds okay?
it might be on my end. I'm hearing like a 4-second delay.
Sounds good to Chris. I could hear you just say that.
Okay.
Okay.
That's because it's.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Disconnected. Our first theme. Cori is clear in video, but Sean is blurry in video. Sean is clear in speech. As clear as speech. Clear in video. Now I hear an echo when your AirPods are in.
Or
So,
it's some kind of wild Inception internet tunnel.
I'm
How
rolling
about
with it.
I'm gonna leave and then I'm gonna join. Can that do that? Does that work?
Yeah, maybe. Try it. I'm gonna use this for a beautiful theme. Why I wanted to talk to Cori. Cori's a philosopher. Cori and I went to philosophy school together. Master's degree in philosophy, and then she went on to get her PhD in philosophy. And it's funny, she's like, your screen's blurry. And I'm like, yeah, your screen's really clear. And then we get on the call, and let me see, now Dr. Cori Wong joined. And we get on the call, and her audio is blurry, and mine is not. Invite to join.
There we go. I think we figured it out.
Hey, as I was saying,
like 5 times over in my head.
I was rushing to get here. I got toddlered. Yeah, no, the thanks, Sabarna. Maybe give the camera a wipe. The camera has a crack in it.
We're just struggling.
Which is further, it works. It works. I've done one like this, and I actually think it kind of adds like one of those Instagram filters. It's kind of like some light. See the light coming out of my hands right now?
Oh, yeah.
This is what happens when you reach the bliss level of self-awareness. Light comes out of your hands. No. I wanted to set this up by introducing people to what you do as a positive philosopher. But it's so funny to me that we are in this like there's like it's not like translation. It's like transmission. There's like blur, and I was like, you're a better philosopher than me because you're not blurry and I am blurry. And part of the work of philosophy is to put things into focus that aren't in focus and get the audio latency completely away.
Yeah.
Run with it, Cori. Say hi.
Yeah.
Say hi to the wonderful people that are here.
Here we are. I just think it's such a good example of, as much as you try to like prepare and plan, and even in your knowing like what is going to happen. We've done this before, but this is not our first dialogue or conversation by any means. And I like texted, was like, I'm ready. I want to make sure the tech works and everything's set up. And you're like, I'm running late. And then it was me. I had it playing somehow in the background of Substack and on the live. I don't even know how to do that. But like, we just go with it, try it, experiment. And I am fully embracing right now, like face forward, straight into failure, open possibility. And I'm okay with that. Because I think that building up our I don't really particularly love the word resilience, but building up our constitution to be able to just like try things is
Yep.
wonderful. And maybe that's
Yep.
because as a child I didn't have a growth mindset. I didn't know that. I wasn't conditioned to have a growth mindset. But now as an adult, I've just really learned that, like, you know what? Trying is important. It doesn't ever have to be perfect, and rarely is it. And also, like, this is just more honest and real. So I feel very comfortable being like very authentic, especially in conversation with you. So even when we were before starting, we were gonna like start chatting, like, why don't we just start? Because of course this is the chat that we want to be doing anyway. So anyway, I'm happy to be here. Thank you for the invitation to join you on our first Substack live
Live.
stream.
It's
And
beautiful. I'm already gonna interrupt you just on the failure
great, do it.
piece. My neighbor sent their kids. I had to talk with my neighbor last night who's sending their kids to 7th grade, 6th grade, middle school, new world. And the counselors were like, middle school is set up for you to fail in meaningful ways, to the parents, that you don't want your kid to get to be a high schooler and not have that repertoire of failure. So we're going to help them fail early. And I'm like, man, that feels, I just put out a song today. I'm so happy
Hey.
with it. And it also feels like a mini failure. It's so weird how it's so weird. Creativity is so bonkers.
Guess what? In a couple of weeks, it's going to be the penultimate show of For the Love of Strangers, which is a thing I've been doing for the past 10 months now. It's like a community experience. People don't know. What is it? A presentation? No. An event? Hardly. A party? Not really. It's something we can't quite like wrap our brains around. But the theme of For the Love of Strangers in a couple of weeks for the penultimate show is on failure too,
Mm.
which is just going to be great because I fail all the time.
And you
Still
are
have my best, worst ideas for how to
you're a
fail.
stand-up philosopher. You
I,
like blend comedy and philosophy and community orientation, or is it wrong to try to say what it is?
no, you mean the stand-up philosophy part?
Yeah,
Definitely not wrong to try to say what it is, but a very bold start for us to go there right away because um, I am trying this new mode of being and interacting with folks, sharing what I think is really powerful and important from a philosophical perspective, the kind of thinking and theory that I find super useful in life. And my goal is to try to do it in a way that's like fun and funny and entertaining. And there's like always been a through line in much of my work for decades that I think is kind of coming from like a part of me as a young child that loved stand-up philosophy but never made it into like the improv like Second City. I didn't go to Chicago with my cohort of all the other drama folks that did and then become like an actor slash writer slash comedian. But I was like, I'm a philosopher, but we could be funny too. Um, I literally have a blog post from like the 2010s about that. But moreover, I just think that there's something really powerful about showing how we can think in ways that are very transformative, but also like engage us at the level of play and levity. And honestly, I always think like as a teacher for so long, when I was teaching college classes, I always would register the students who understood what we were talking about when they got the joke. Like if my jokes land, then I know you're following. So it's also another like level of building meaning and making connections to elaborate our understanding to the point where we can kind of like navigate and express what we know through a different totally like construction of how we communicate what we're saying. That's why I love inside jokes. Like I just think they're such a beautiful form of intimacy. And I think it's always true that well, when I talk about stand-up philosophy, people go like, well, aren't some of the best comedians really just the philosophers of our time? And some of them are, for sure. And also, I think a lot of philosophers could do much more impactful work if they could engage an audience in a way that's a little bit more enjoyable and fun and funny too. So we can all, you know, take from each other and learn from one another's strengths. But yeah, stand-up philosophy is just it's a new approach to something I've always done, but with new branding and new marketing and truly a new attempt at delivery.
we have a joke about like the giggle meter in our sessions, that basically the best sessions are when people laugh the most.
Mm-hmm.
And then I was like, that's usually how I measure how my teaching days at CSU. So I'm
Yeah.
like, it was a good day, people laughed, or it's not a good day, people didn't laugh. And then I was like, is that really the metric you want to use? Like for having a good teaching day is that people laughed a lot?
Well, it's hard in my vein of work because so much of what I do is like very serious, you
That's
know?
what it
Or I'm usually in the realm of talking about like systems of oppression and fascism and global white supremacy, violence and domination and why we are so bad to each other and the planet. So if you can turn that into a way of making jokes, like we're not joking about those serious issues, but I mean, many, many communities and cultures for centuries and millennia have thrived and survived by being able to maintain a sense of humanity with each other
Yeah.
that has some bond of laughter and connection and humor and play and like trickery or mocking or satire. Like it goes through a whole gamut of the ways that comedy or jokes can really bond people together in ways that are very important. And again, that's very different from like chuckling with your oppressor, as a means to like relate to them. Like, no, that's not what I'm doing. Some might argue that like, well, maybe if you could talk to a white supremacist and get them to laugh a little bit, they'd be more open to hearing what you're trying to convey, which I'm I don't go there. I'm not in that realm. I'm not trying to put my energy in that space. But in terms of like building community, and I think in a learning space, we are building community and forming bonds of support that can feel comfortable and authentic enough for us to really grow together. That, yeah, in a teaching context, when we're here for the same purposes, that sometimes giggling and laughing is a good metric to reinforce that we're all on the same page, we're moving with each other. And it's just another cue that like, I get you, you get me, we're in on this, we're here presently with one another. So I think it is a good metric when we
I
can
too.
laugh
I
together.
mean, there's some science about learning that we learn when we laugh. I want to go full bore on the L words for the alliteration game. We've got laughter, levity, learning, love, loving kindness, and
Uh-huh.
your project of liberation is local. It made me
Yeah.
think of liberation. I want to go liberation is local because there is a sense that the work that you're doing is very local. I don't know if people
Mhm.
know this about me, but I am fiercely local. Maybe not from a conceptual level. It's just how my life has been. I Cougar High School, basically Fort Collins, Northern Colorado. I feel very
Mhm.
strong about being a local and local commitments. At the same time, I love Substack. I loved Clubhouse because it could connect. I made connections with Subarna, who's on the call, who's in New Delhi, and
Oh,
there's some
hey.
various like synchronicities and how she was raging against the trash it in scattered through the Himalayas where there's birds singing at the same time. So you have this beautiful like symbol of levity of the birds and this seriousness of our responsibility with the earth. And I wonder if you could you just talk to us about liberation is local and like what you're doing as a local. If are you have you grown out of that? Are you not doing that anymore? What's
Mm.
going on with
That's a good question. I'm sorry. My brain is not going to be able to move on from this until I say it. That when you talked about the L word and you said all those L words, you didn't mention lesbians, which is the truest like connotation of the L word for certain communities. So that's why I was like giggling, like, oh, we're gonna go to the L word. Okay, great. So the revamp was, people had reviews. No,
Yeah,
we'll go
I would
back to
love
your
to talk
original
about lesbians. We can totally
your
go there.
your original question. So yeah, love and levity and liberation and local. Um so I I still very much consider myself strongly oriented on the local level for sure. And part of why I think this like evolution has grown for me to be so focused on local engagement, it makes a lot of sense. Coming from, I think, the 2010s, I'm just going to do a long throwback really fast. There's a critical part of my experience doing publicly engaged work where I stopped doing YouTube and blogging, which is kind of like throwing out so much content into the internet of the anonymous sea of strangers.
I want to back up. I'm going to back us up a tiny bit before that because that was after you did your PhD in positive philosophy, right? Or was that during?
It was actually during, like it was during graduate school
So
when I
you're
really
doing
started to
academic,
do.
high level PhD work on positive philosophy. You're interested in public philosophy.
Yeah.
You're doing a YouTube channel because that's what public philosophers do, right? They share their work on
No
YouTube.
one, very few people did it at the time, actually. So when I was in graduate school with a strong emphasis on public philosophy, I had some things that I was involved with. At that stage, it was like really the early days of public philosophy and publicly engaged philosophy kind of gaining traction. So as a graduate student, I was involved in some of those conversations. But since I, you know, left graduate school, went on with my own life, that little subsector of philosophy has definitely grown and established and gotten more roots in formal ways. But at the time when I was a graduate student, I was blogging and did some YouTube videos, and it was strongly discouraged because I'm like, you know, early mid 20s, and everybody was like, this is going to just ruin your chances of any kind of career because no one's going to take you as a serious scholar if you're not actually writing your papers, trying to do conferences, publishing in journals, which I never did. And instead, you're just like talking to YouTube. Like, people aren't going to take you seriously, which is so ironic because as the years and decades have gone on, like that is actually one of the only ways that people have known me because I didn't publish in journals and do the traditional academic route anyway after graduate school. So those two things were developing side by side for me. And I want to add one more thing. The reason why, always the motivation for doing publicly engaged work for me is because I know from my own experience, and then those subsequently that I've had shared experiences with, that certain ways of thinking and learning are really transformative and meaningful for building the kind of lives that we want, for us to see ourselves and each other more clearly. I always am such a champion of the kind of philosophy that I love, excuse me, because I know that it can situate us in a place of responsibility. Like, if we really believe in making the world better, we have to have an understanding that can inform and motivate our actions to follow suit. So, the transformative power of really good theory is what always spoke the most to me. And I was like, if it's so good and powerful, then why isn't it readily available to people outside of universities? And at the time, the early days of, social media, YouTube, that kind of stuff, I was like, this is a great democratizing technology. Things have gotten a little skewed in the decade since, but there was a real optimism that I shared with others of having less gatekeeping about which voices and could be published. So all that's to say, I did that during graduate school. But then once I got out of graduate school, and I think it was partly that I finally got a full-time job, but also the reckoning of like, so I got these degrees, but like, wait a minute, maybe I shouldn't be the one talking about all of this. So I had like a really healthy humility check where I started to feel uncomfortable with me saying things in a sort of overly generalized way about big topics when I'm not the expert on all of those things.
Mm.
So maybe it was like that early 20s, like overconfidence or something that was initially moving me too. But I got really quiet for a while. Then another key turning point was that I ended up resigning from my uh, career, if you will, in higher education. I was doing administration and went into full-time consulting, doing this kind of work as much as I could. And there was a conversation I had with someone in particular. Like, I was embedded in a university locally here, but when I left the university, I left so much of what was like my network and people who knew me. So I was almost a year later at a public event in town, and someone was like, I'm so glad that you're here doing your work. It's so important. It's like, we need you here. And I was like, cool, cool. I love the sentiment of support, but like, no one's hiring me. So I need to get work if I'm actually going to be able to stay here. And that was the same time, and it was like, I really believe that I need to focus on a local engagement because, one, knowing each other and being in real relationship, I think, is absolutely crucial for doing any kind of like meaningful change. It's where we have the greatest abundance of additional resources beyond the superficial kind of things we might think of resource, but from just like access, but true like knowing, love, care, depth of understanding. At this point, you started by asking, how long have we known each other? How long have we been friends? It's literally decades at this point that we've been kind of moving in parallel with one another. And that to me is a sort of intangible value that really adds depth to a different way of being able to engage and relate and then like continue to create together. So that's one reason why I wanted to be local. But the other was a very strategic kind of consideration. I usually operate with like multiple layers in my brain, and one of them is like this kind of strategic net mapping of stuff. And I thought, okay, my work was really always, it's been involved in like culture change and how to do this kind of transformation within ourselves, with each other in our relationships, but ultimately in like the spaces that we have influence over. And my grand strategy was to do deep local engagement because I thought, we know it doesn't work when people feel isolated, that they're just fighting as like a singular person against something so massive. But if we could orchestrate and collaborate and connect around shared values, assumptions, even shared tactics, with the same kind of language where we can like, again, know each other, trust each other, develop relationships, we might be able to sort of uh, approach change in a more multifaceted way in a local context, but you're doing it here and this person's doing it here and here and here. So now, even though it feels like we might still be singular in our own spaces or organizations, we're not moving alone because people are kind of trying to do those adjustments in a more closely contained kind of space. So the local community, I was like, what are the pillars? The school district, the city, the county, like some of the main structures of a local space. Those were the people I wanted to be engaging with, community organizers, nonprofits, like really fixating on helping to build a little bit more coherence and alignment in these different parts within a community. I mean, I'm not saying anything's like super special or unique about what I'm doing, but that was part of my emphasis on the local strategy. Then came liberation as local. So that was there's a way that this has evolved. I'm saying a lot, but this will be the last thing I spew on. Liberation is Local is a weekly facilitated learning space. We've been doing it for 75 weeks now. And I started it back in May of 2024, thankfully through an unexpected grant that is a beautiful vision. It's intended to invest in local leaders who are doing liberatory work. So it's rooted in Colorado. So I was really surprised and super grateful to get this funding. And it was just like the boost of encouragement and confidence that I needed to really try to create a space that isn't making me money. But I want to be able to give back. And part of the reason why I wanted to give back was that I'd been doing so much work in our community with organizations and leaders and teams. But that dynamic is very much like, come in as a consultant, tell us something, give us a series or trainings. We are learning this content. And for me, it didn't even feel like teaching can be, so dynamic. I was like, I'm not learning anything in this right now. Like, I'm telling you stuff, and sometimes people don't want to hear what I'm telling them, because of power dynamics and resistance to change. But it was such a shifted kind of way of engaging in work that I really felt a lack in myself. I'm like, I don't think we're getting it. I'm not hitting the material and the thinking that I know I need. So I listened to some wisdom about creating what you know you need. And I know what I needed was a space where I was able to really go deeper with the thoughts that I believed in were necessary for us to really make real transformation, not like co-opted, commodified DEI work that just becomes a new market for business and corporations. I was like, how do we actually embody this change? So Liberation is Local became a space where every week we overall are like exploring what liberation looks and feels like, what that requires for us, and how we can change our actions and our choices to be in alignment right where we are every day right now. One of the principles is that liberation is possible right here, even in these conditions. And over the year and a half or so, even out my thinking obviously has changed. It's evolved so much thanks to this beautiful space with others. And the language and even our approach has shifted. We're in the third iteration of trying to, like, how do we do this? What does this look like? So a lot of testing and trial. But now a lot of the language that comes through with liberation is local, that's kind of like the foundation, is that yes, liberation is possible, but our idea is to move with love from a place of liberation, even in these conditions. And the latest has been like, especially in these conditions, because I know I started this. For me, a very powerful motivation was like watching the world just continually devolve through competing and like overlapping crises and catastrophes. Climate, but watching genocide every single day on my phone for 2 years. Just on and on and on, like the rise of fascism, so many things. And I was like, we're fucked. This is bad. But I don't want us to ever feel like we can't do anything about it. So the especially in these conditions has become a very important like foothold that still even now liberation has to be possible. So it's so great. It's the space where I learn the most, and I'm leaning more and more into like really pouring as much of myself and my thinking and my learning with others into that space every week. And now your final bite of that was like, am I still doing local things? Because I just decided to get on Substack. And this latest iteration is I'm sharing the content of Liberation is Local through my own Substack chat, which is, I've always just tried to think about like, I want the work and the power of it to carry and really be open to folks who want it, to make that accessible. So there's really no way to replace or even recreate the conversations that happen on a weekly basis with a group of very committed people who come together, and we have been learning together for over a year. But I know that there's something about like sharing it and people can do something else with it. So I'm now moving back into the space of being more public online, from Liberation is Local, sharing my pages in the chat, doing Substack lives now. I just my second one. I'm like, am I going to be on YouTube again? Um, but that is even its own test of like processing the process out loud, learning out loud, and kind of inviting people into the real process instead of having something like the trainings or workshop. Here's the content and I'm just giving it to you. I want people to be able to follow my own way of learning and engaging too, which is vulnerable. It can be scary, but it's honest. And I think now, over 10 years later, I feel a little bit more fortitude in myself, hopefully, to be able to do that again, in a different way than, or like an evolved way than I was when I was in graduate school. Same principles, but just slightly different approaches.
There's so much beautiful resonance with what I feel like I'm doing and what I
Mm-hmm.
see myself doing, and the difficulty of describing what we're doing. Conversations with committed, curious people where I feel like I'm learning as much and creating what you need
Yeah.
and building that as a space. We said earlier that we could have one metric of, how much is there, how much laughing is there in the room. There could also be like, how much transformation does this feel like
Mm-hmm.
this is
Yeah.
happening? Does it feel new? Or does it feel like I'm doing the same thing? Because this is a new group of people. And this is a new time and a new day and a new situation with new. Does it feel that way? So, and then I kind of want to celebrate we also talked about failure and just the sense of like continuing going and being on YouTube and then being off YouTube and emphasizing community. And then now we have this kind of like emphasizing community, but harvesting, sharing, culling, curating the best of that community and finding ways to share it with other people that might benefit from it is exactly where I am in this current iteration that we're going
Mm-hmm.
through. I want to pivot to Nietzsche and power. And I want to read these three definitions to you. This came up today from, I'm going to see if I've not seen this. I thought this was pretty elegant. Um, Tara Springett. This is from Tom Morgan's Leading Edge Substack. Tara Springett has these three definitions, and I found this really elegant. I'm curious about your reaction to this. And number one, it's for love, power, and wisdom.
Mm.
So let's go love, power, and wisdom. Love. The deep wish for oneself and others to be healthy and happy. Love, the deep wish for oneself and others to be healthy and happy. Power, the ability to change oneself and one's environment. Power, the ability to change oneself and one's environment. And wisdom, using love and power in perfect balance.
Huh.
So we have wisdom framed as a balance between love and power in the sense of our capacity, let's say, for transformation and liberation. So for greater freedom in a sense. Is that how you read Nietzsche? I mean, here, let me, where this connects for me is that when we talk about what we're doing in our groups, something is weird, okay? Like, I can tell people about the Wisdom Workshop. I've told a lot of people about what we do in the Wisdom Workshop, and it's different. And one of my favorite definitions is you should just put on this weird hat and come to this place at this time and just see what it is. Like, it's almost better if you don't know. When I talk to you about it in my language,
Yeah.
that's not what it is. What it is this kind of, I feel like a felt sense of love actualized, of wanting people to be healthy, happy, and free. And then the power question is the ability to modify ourselves and our environment in a way that helps us be healthy, happy, and free. And I feel like that's kind of an elegant definition here. And I feel like that's what Nietzsche is doing at the level of language. He's like, oh, is this the language that you're using? Boom, bash, pow. What do you see? It's like he's holding up a mirror. That's how I read it. Maybe there's not so much boom, bash, pow. But I do like the fact
Well,
that boom,
Nietzsche's a
bash,
boom
and
bash
pow.
pow kind of guy.
He's a boom, bash, pow. He's a boom, bash, pow. And there's like this sense that language, what we're doing is beyond language. It's almost like it's closer to laughter and levity.
Oh, okay. Well, yeah, I'll go with you there for Nietzsche for sure. I laughed hysterically because I was caught off guard by is this over
I know.
Nietzsche?
This is like some new age definitions. And then I was like, okay, is this
Well,
what Nietzsche's doing?
first of all, I was really like struck when you're like, these are the three definitions, because for anybody watching, like this was not planned. So this is like a pop quiz moment for me. I have my own very strong definitions of love, power, and wisdom that are like have become highly refined and central to everything that I'm doing in my work. So I was listening to the definitions and like that you offered and seeing how they differ from the ways that I talk about my definitions. And it was so much there that when you're like, and Nietzsche, I was like, okay, we gotta like rework a whole like way to like bring that together and make sense. So I know you really wanted to talk about Nietzsche. Can I talk a little bit about those
Of
definitions
course.
first?
And I will say that is, I did a video on philosophy that I haven't put out yet. But I'm like, if I was going to boil down a graduate and undergraduate degree in philosophy into 3 words, it would be define your terms. So yeah, I like, let's go there. Let's define, how would you define love, power, and wisdom?
I feel like I'm like, you're just taking me
I
for
know.
a ride right now, because I was like, if I were to define philosophy for people, I would say it's love, power, and wisdom. So let me tell you why. Love is an especially important thing. And even in Liberation is Local, I said we start with like move with love.
That's right.
And I love the fact that bell hooks, look at this, we're like prepped. Bell hooks all about love is gaining more and more popularity as the years go on, which is so well deserved. In this book, one of the things that I love about this book is that bell hooks is basically saying like, wow, for a very, very, very long time, people have talked about love, but we don't really know what love is. We don't have a very good definition of love. So this book offers a definition of love that is following her own lineage of people who she's learned from. And then I actually one time went through and did like basically an indexing. This is the cover version of it, but I have a page where I've indexed all of the elements or values or practices that bell hooks also includes as like this is part of love too. So you have the definition and then you have like the boom blown out like all the details of what love looks like and requires, which there was like 70 of them or something. So anyway, bell hooks' definition of love is the will to extend oneself for the purpose of nurturing one's own or another's spiritual development. And I have adopted that definition in a different way just to clarify the spiritual development part. So to be more concrete. So I use the definition of love as the will to extend oneself for one's own or another's healing, transformation, or liberation. And we could break up the healing, transformation, and liberation part, which is echoing a little bit about like health and healing. There's something there. But the big difference between bell hooks' definition and then the way I'm using it as a definition from what you offered is we move from a deep wish into actually the will to extend oneself. So it's not just a hope, it's actually an action. And it takes effort. So the will is kind of like the motivation. To extend is the action of stretching, of like pursuing and actually doing a thing. And you have the will to extend yourself for a specific purpose, which is geared towards yourself or another's, in my way, healing, transformation, or liberation. So it's not just even, this kind of like, I'm extending myself because I want to for you. It's very focused and purposeful. That way we don't get into kind of like toxic, codependent, and weird kind of patterns and call that love. So
I'm
that's
going
one
to
definition.
I'm gonna pause here to invite, say hi to Jessica. Maybe not invite is too strong of a word, but introduce. Jessica does rewilding philosophy, embodied philosophy. She's in
Nice.
Germany, in Berlin. Cori is a practical philosopher. We are defining philosophy, as I like to define it, as a defining of our terms. Cori says we might define it as love, power, and wisdom. We just got Cori's definition for love, which is
Yeah.
the will to extend oneself for one's own or another's healing, transformation, and liberation. We emphasize the will as more than a deep wish, and to extend as the verb or the action that is happening. And we could say more about healing, transformation, and liberation, but I want to just turn it back over to you and
Cool.
give Jessica a little bit more of that kind of context for her to be able to jump in here.
And so I think that, so I would say these are, maybe I'm not defining philosophy as this, but I would say they are key,
Sure.
That this is the heart and soul, the mind, body, and soul of philosophy is love, power, and wisdom. So power, you offered as like the ability to change yourself and the environment,
Yep. The
which is
ability
a
to
little bit,
change oneself and one's environment.
so that's a little closer to the way that I have been using a definition of power. I think that my approach to power right now is like very, very, very front and center. And it might become the thing
Yep.
that I end up focusing on because it is imbuing everything from liberation is local to everything. And so, yeah, I hear Nietzsche here. Let's just
There
look
we
at this.
go.
It's like I'm prepared. We'll just put Nietzsche right next to us with the will to power being a key fundamental aspect and major concept in Nietzsche's work. But power, in the way that I talk about it, is more than just the ability to change oneself and the environment. I use two different kinds of ways to describe it, and one of them is the ability to influence the conditions of our choices.
Ooh, very Buddhist. There we go.
So why I really
Can we say it here?
prefer,
Can we hear it one more time?
yeah, power is the ability to influence the conditions of our choices. For me, I'm deeply an existentialist. So the will speaks to that. And then also the conditions of our choices is leaving room for really autonomous choice. Like we have will to make choices, but power is about setting up the conditions that either open or close our choices. So the possibilities for more choices, freedom from an existential point of view of like using your freedom to open up more freedom, I think power for, I'm going to say good in this way with scare quotes, is like creating conditions where we have more choices available to us. I just did a little live stream on Wednesday where I like riffed again, bringing bell hooks in a kind of impromptu way, where I really like her description of oppression is experienced as the absence of choices. And so when we get real practical about it, we're like, how do you know when you're oppressed? When you're like, damned if you do, damned if you don't, and you don't have a good option. Privilege in unjust systems of power is usually like you have some good choices available to you, like good choices. You have multiple pathways that you could pursue. If you are in an oppressed position, sometimes none of them are good choices, and you still have to make a choice. So I like to think of power as the ability to influence the conditions of our choices so that we can actually create more better choices for everybody. That's my ideal goal. I also talk about it as the means to produce your intended outcomes, even in the face of opposition. So that, because that I think is a real like illuminating and pretty clear way to think about power, the way that most people assume we're talking about it. When we talk about power dynamics, they say, well, I'm not the one in a position of power because I could want to do this. This could be my intended outcome, but I still can't produce it because they're the ones with the ultimate decision-making power. So the ability to influence the ability to influence the conditions of our choices and the means to produce our intended outcomes, even in the face of opposition. But why I like that second one is because it also invites the true consideration that people have power. We can still produce our intended outcomes, even in the face of opposition, like a fascist government, if we build power together in a different kind of way. So it's not something you have or you don't have. It becomes something that you can build and share and still have intended outcomes even in the face of opposition, rather than granting it like, well, they're the ones with power, so they're going to say yes or no, and I can't do anything about it. So that's one way. The third one, we're running wisdom. Are you ready?
Yeah, we are.
This one carries me. So I mean, it's pretty common to go to the default definition of philosophy as the love of wisdom, which sort of pedestals wisdom as this like mystic knowing or something. There's something special about the knowing that you get from philosophy. And I have, over so many years now, found such a loving home in defining wisdom as truth with lineage. So I say wisdom is truth with lineage. And I love that because for me, part of why I think philosophy can be so powerful and transformative is because it's coming through generations, and the truth is what carries. So like, I could say, oh, some of my influences are bell hooks, but then I read, please let me have it right here. This would be so cool if I could just give you a book. I don't think I can. But I'm thinking like a contemporary, I have a lot of books right here, but not the one I'm looking for. A contemporary example would be like Adrienne Marie Brown's Emergent Strategy, which she's not, or like Adrienne Marie Brown isn't like a philosopher in an academic kind of sense, but learned from Grace Lee Boggs, who was a philosopher. And when emergent strategy resonates with the masses, then I'm like, cool, yes, of course, because I get what emergent strategy is bringing, especially like the notion of like a fractal. It's an example of liberation is local. We're talking about fractals being the way that we do small parts that are reflective of a larger whole in the system. So it matters how we do the little things. So like, we could say it as emergent strategy. We could say it as liberation is local. We could talk about it in any other form, depending on who we are like moving with in our lineage, but the truth is what carries. So whether it's I learned from James Baldwin or, I am learning from an elder in my community, to me, the truth is what gets passed down. And I like truth with lineage. Now that's very anti-Nietzsche. But wisdom, I think, is something that, like, I'm not just going to say that wisdom comes from lived experience in your own life. That I don't know if I want to, like, put that on the same level. But wisdom as truth with lineage, I think, grounds us in something that carries and connects across generations past and future, that gives us a way, again, where I started way back when in this conversation, that like philosophy for me is important because it can help locate us in knowing ourselves and each other. And so for me, a lineage of thinkers, what I'm tracing through that is my own true like line of relationship with a series of people who were related to each other based on the truth that connects them. And it can be very different. But like Bell Hooks knew Thich Nhat Hanh, studied with him. And earlier today, I was listening to David Dean, and I was like, I know we're going to have to bring David Dean into this conversation, who was like one of our shared teachers. There is not a man that I love more and could disagree more fully with, but yet actually completely align in so many ways. I was listening to some of his recent work. He's doing like really amazing stuff right now, talking about like Christian anarchism and how like I don't know, basically saying like you can't be Christian and do the stock market. I mean, he's doing really radical work. And I still don't understand anything that he says, because he's like, it has to be under God, one God. There's no non-theological answer to any of these questions. And I fundamentally cannot get on board with that. But I love the man and trust him. I would trust him with my life, you know? So like the wisdom of our lineages, I think, can also be a helpful way to like stay open to differences in their schools of thinking and somehow be able to find things. Are you looking for David Dean right now? Yeah.
I just wanted to I wanted to put it in here.
Yeah.
Spelling.
Yeah. I mean, he says some stuff that I don't know. I've been listening, and he's just such a powerful, brilliant person. And the last time he and I spoke was, you and I have talked since David Dean and I last spoke. But we basically were like, yeah, no, we cannot agree. Like, yes, we agree, we agree, we agree. And then on the fundamental, most basic level, we cannot agree with each other, because he's like, and that's why there's a God. And I say, no, I can't do God. But somehow, you know, there's a reason why his classes shaped us so thoroughly.
Yeah.
And I still am just like so wildly grateful that we had the experience of learning from someone like David Dean. Like, amazing. Yeah. So wisdom is truth with lineage. And that was, your definition was using love and power in perfect balance. Maybe there is something blended in there when we come to like truth. Because what you didn't mention in any of your love, power, wisdom definitions is truth. And I'm all about truth right now too.
Me too. And I think what draws me to Jessica's work in the chat, is the sense of nature and ecology as the arbiter of truth. You want to talk, and why I like, what's her name? The woman that wrote, Jenny Odell, on the resistance, how to do nothing. The real resistance is paying attention to our bioregional ecosystems. So we actually are in communion with the plant species that live alongside of us, and our attention is slowed down to their truth as well. I think there's a lot of traction there. Couple things. Seeing time, playing timekeeper, facilitator, host is a good time to invite questions from the anyone that's still with us on the live, to honor the wisdom of people here as their curiosity. I also just want to do. I got full on chills remembering being in David Dean's class, and David Dean is a Irish Catholic Nietzsche scholar, which I found to be inspiring on its face. That Irish Catholic, right? He's Irish Catholic?
Yeah.
The fact that an Irish Catholic would interface with Nietzsche so thoroughly and take it so seriously, and the challenge that he gave us in his way of being. I can see his passion and his turning red in the face, and isn't this what it's about? Isn't this what it's about? Like, to just a community of undergrads and us being like, oh my God, this guy. Anyway, I wanted to give other people that sense as I remember that. And really I want to honor you mentioning the will as your definition of love, and the difference between a will and a wish. And I also, the only other thing I wanted to say that I felt like, I'm glad that you mentioned Thich Nhat Hanh. I'm getting emotional at this now, because sense of lineage being super powerful. And you were talking about liberation in the contexts of our social systems that either expand our choices or diminish our choices, expand our capacity and conditions to make choices or diminish our capacity and ability to make choices. And it reminds me of Sylvia Boorstein, who wrote Happiness as an Inside Job. She's a Buddhist monk, and which is a wonderful grandmother of a person. She has this great phrase that she can tell how awake she is in any moment by her capacity to love and have compassion. So when she is awake and clear, compassion and love are easy. And when she is not, they're not. And I just found that's like a very interesting. So I feel like, as you said, the kind of fractal in Adrienne Marie Brown's emergent strategy and the fractal knowing of like social systems, and where I've been living as the psychological systems that enable us to be in these spaces of love, the conditions of that kind of positive psychology and positive philosophy. Anyway, I had to make that connection.
Mm-hmm.
Jess says, how does philosophy for you differ from practical wisdom, if it does? Do you think the practice of philosophy is the same as the practice for wisdom?
I was caught by that question too, because so many people define philosophy as the love of wisdom. I mean, that's like the Greek definition of it, the Greek translation, right?
That's what the
The love
word
of
means,
wisdom.
technically.
So technically speaking,
And Sophia, we could say, is a particular branch of wisdom, the
sure,
practical, as it were. Or no, actually, isn't Sophia is more the wisdom or knowledge of the way things are, of the truth, where there is a different word for the practical domain of knowledge that is, I might need to brush up on my Greek.
not gonna find it.
Anyway, I'm gonna
But
get that because I can't
I'm
stand it.
actually kind of interested in the love of wisdom too. Like, I don't think that's what the Greeks were talking about, but if we think the love of love as the will to extend oneself for the purpose of nurturing one's own or another's healing, transformation, and liberation, then in that way it is very practical, because the love is a practice. It's a verb. It's something that we do as an action, a movement of the will. So it's not just an affection for, which I think is what gives philosophy a bad name. If everybody's like, oh, you're just cozying up with ideas for what, your own like entertainment or something to pass the
In your
day.
ivory tower, publishing in
Yeah,
your yeah.
right. So I think that if we take love as the will to extend oneself for this purpose and have that be a practice and an action, then the ways that we extend ourselves for the sake of wisdom, which in my way, oh, phronesis, yeah, this is Jessica's
Yep, there it
putting it
is.
in there. Smart. Is well, I just lost it. Oh, the wisdom is the truth with lineage. Then I think that putting all of these different words together to kind of come up with a more comprehensive idea, if we're really living a philosophical life the way that I think philosophers should, if we like conjure up the notion of the art of living, um, and the creation of the self or the writing of the self, the ways that we be, um, there's something about the will to extend oneself through action and practice for a specific purpose of healing, transformation, and liberation that is not just relegated to the sphere of ideas, but actually grounded in the truth and the lineages of truth that we are part of. And I feel like that also situates us with a lot of responsibility for how we continue that lineage, which is, I think, a really important role for philosophers right now in our day and time in these conditions, that we have a responsibility to carry on the practices and the insights of truths that can help us now from a place of love through a will to do this work for others, that can cultivate us as the kinds of beings who have the ability to influence our conditions and continue to open up more choices for the possibilities. It's even just, I'm going to say this because I was listening to this conversation that David Dean was having, I think last week, with somebody else, could not disagree or not understand what they were talking about more. But the one phrasing that David continually brought up was a failure of the imagination from a theological perspective of understanding Christianity. Again, I don't get it. But failures of imagination, I think, are comprehensive across the board, something that we all need to grapple with regardless of our traditions, because they keep us small in the ways that we then have a field of possible choices for us. Like sometimes the power is about influencing the conditions of our choices by expanding the visions of possibilities we can even imagine through less failure of the imagination. So liberation is local, just to go back to that, is like it is a practice in radical imagination, but not in just utopic dreaming. It's actually developing a disciplined way of understanding what could be possible, which is happening in the here and now in our concrete material lives. It's about shifting the possibilities that we see for us today, right here, right now, where we are exactly located in our spaces, in our families, in our communities, in our bodies, so that we can see where we have more opportunities to do the practical work of philosophical practice, if you will, of really extending ourselves from this place of love for the sake of truth, rooted in so much more that extends beyond just us as singular individuals.
Well, now we've got that all figured out.
It's so funny. Yeah. I wanted to go back because actually I think we skipped over something. So this is like a self-interested sort of callback. When we started a little bit frazzled, we were talking about positive philosophy, and you wanted to like say like what is that? And we've kind of hinted at it. But I just wanted to share that like when I think about positive philosophy, this is a phrasing that I made up. It doesn't really exist outside of
Oh,
me.
but it does now, Cori. It does.
It's
Nietzsche would be proud.
not to be confused with positivist philosophy, which was definitely its own longstanding tradition, of which I am not fully a part of.
Me neither.
But positive philosophy is a riff off of positive psychology to bring in the notion that like maybe there's something important about the good positive feelings, experiences, affects, emotions, and like things that we can really try to develop more in ourselves. So positive psychology is often, I'm going to do like a very cursory, not not fair generalization of it, of like seeing the value of gratitude or compassion in being able to like have a virtuous upward cycle in the way that one experiences their life instead of a downward spiral where everything's just like worse and worse and worse. Positive philosophy for me, I was like, there's something to be really gained about like the physiological experiences of positive things like joy, excitement, enthusiasm, and compassion and gratitude and all of that. But I feel like that doesn't get brought in so much into the ways of practicing philosophy, especially when people think of, at best, it's boring. At worst, it's like tyranny, like philosophy can be used for very bad things. Uh, its most neutral forms are usually like people are not interested and will just rather fall asleep. But if we could make philosophy instead something that elevates our embodied experiences, it excites us, it inspires us, it encourages and empowers us, it motivates us, and actually like helps us see and be more alive. This is echoing a little bit of Nietzsche too, just to kind of be keeping him close. I was like, I think there's something really important about that. So I wrote my dissertation and titled it Positive Philosophy. It was like affective, feminist practices of affective something and political resistance. So some word salad like that. But now my small business, like the consulting that I do is positive philosophy consulting, because the other piece of that I think is really important is not just that we get good feelings from the ideas that we hold as like a righteous truth. Like now I know the truth and I can feel really good about myself and good in the world about that. But it actually is about developing the discipline and the capacity to move through the reflective learning, thinking process and have that process itself be something that motivates and inspires and encourages us in a positive kind of way. So I don't want us to land in a kind of like righteous knowledge claim, like we hold steady with the truth, even though I'm saying wisdom is truth with lineage. But I do feel like there's and maybe this is why I'm like leaning more towards doing the public processing out loud and inviting people into like joining me in my own process. Because if love is the will to extend oneself for the purpose of nurturing one's own or another's healing, transformation, and liberation, transformation is doing a lot of work in that definition.
That's
And transformation for me is often, very closely related to just the process of learning. So one of my other fundamental questions I always ask and like start most spaces with groups or organizations is, what does learning feel like? And it's such a basic question, but I think it's important for us to get really clear on the fact that, like, if we don't know what learning looks and feels like, then we might be learning something, but misidentify it as a different kind of experience that we want to resist because it doesn't feel good. And we can also open ourselves up to the fact that, like, learning can be a good feeling too if we orient ourselves in that way. So when people are like, learning is uncomfortable, it makes us feel so much like shame or guilt about all these things that we have to unlearn. Yes, but also, like, that's not the only category of felt experience in learning. Learning, if we have an orientation to like failing, trying, all these things, or I don't know, now I'm just curious, there's wonder and awe and fascination and like all these other things. So I'm trying to orient ourselves to be able to move through the necessary transformations that we all have to be participating in if we want to be a part of like helping each other in the world, from a place of really encouraging like this embodied sense of what learning can feel like, how it can be a positive experience. And I think that's politically salient. And then like doing it from a place of intentionality, which is our will and our practice, and hopefully more of the philosophical roles that some of us have can be understood in that capacity instead of this ivory tower intellectualism of like theory, where it's actually the cultivation of souls. We could say it's the enlivening of bodies and here in spirits. And here we are going back to Nietzsche, of the will to power to be as healthy, to be as robust and as strong as we can. And then, of course, there's like levity, and Nietzsche's all about like singing and laughing and the being like the ass that's just making a fool of themselves and dancing, because there's an element of like freedom that comes with being so wholly embodied in that space.
Well, once again, now that we got that all sorted out, we can. I feel like a big success introducing you, Cori, to the people on this call. I don't know if you see that Jess has a yes, yes,
Yeah.
yes to the imagination, positive philosophy. That's great. Ellen's this nice callback to David Dean. Imagination is the
Mhm.
voice of daring. If there is anything godlike about God, it is that he dared to imagine everything. Um, we have been on a positive, I was about to say positive philosophy kick. Maybe I should stick with that positive psychology kick. And I'd say one of the interesting things was this James Baldwin quote that someone asked James Baldwin um, if he feels despair. And his
Right.
response is
Yeah.
something like, I don't have the luxury for despair. I'm enraged. What's going on is I'm enraged. And there's a sense that rage promotes a kind of action or engagement, a actual doing of some kind. And I think in this frame, we said rage is a positive emotion,
Hmm.
in the
Yeah.
fact that positive emotions are not those that have us feel good. Be like, oh, I feel so good, bypassing everything that I could otherwise be doing by feeling good, right? And so I guess I'm just echoing and appreciating part of your answer that I hear as the enlivening of bodies and the cultivation of souls, that we do this through this engagement, which is another piece of positive psychology,
Hmm.
experience, failure, and failure in the sense of a faithful attempt in learning, of doing something, having it not work out, doing it again, which is not a failure of the imagination. It's like an engagement of the imagination in the real world. And then the other pieces of this is it helps us relate. So our relationships are the heart of what we're looking at, our
Hmm.
relationships to ourselves and to others and to our life worlds, our world building, create meaning and have some kind of accomplishments. So positive emotions, engagements, relationships, meaning, and accomplishments. And we're on the meaning week now in this 5-week exploration. And I guess, I could ask, like, what does this mean to us? but I also just, I don't know. This is a long way of saying, like, I always appreciate talking with you, Cori. Your work is so resonant. It's another powerful R word in this sense of relating as a real resource and this kind
Hmm.
of that connection. So I think that's the callback for me of what is standing out to this conversation is the quality of these kinds of relationships as a resource. I could write a Substack on this and it would not convey
Hmm.
the felt quality. So I've been on a little bit of a Zen in the Art of Motorcycle Maintenance kick. It would not convey the quality of this relationship that I feel like is the nourishing piece,
Hmm.
or at least is to me what is so fascinating about the way I am doing philosophy in the world with groups of people. Um, so that's what I appreciate. I'm wondering if you have anything that you wish we would have talked about, or anything that we any rounding the bends of.
Um, well, I want to add, I think because I've been so much in my process of learning and like I just have to say the past 4 years, but especially the past 2 years have been fundamental, like to changing everything for me. And it's not like I'm a totally different person. It's just like a wild refinement. So much like polishing and adjustments that have moved me in a way where like I'm saying similar things that I was saying 15 years ago, but in a very different way with a very different kind of quality. And the one thing that has stood out the most to me that like I cannot leave a space now. I think this is going to be my new commitment. I cannot end a conversation or leave a space without making this one clarifying point because I just feel like it's so, so desperately important. I hope that in all of our efforts, whatever it is that we're doing, if we believe that the world can, should, must be better, I believe that it's important for us to be doing our work, like in the best way that we can possibly do it, in the roles that we are most situated to do because of our experience, because of our talents, because of our place in relational networks, everything. Like this is the way that my work is like really shifting right now. If we were going to talk about my philosophy, that was the big thing. We're not going to do that. No, we can't do that. But I would love
We'll
to
do
be like,
another.
what is my philosophy? If I were to say this is what I'm doing, I that's a really intriguing question that I haven't actually asked myself in like 20 years. So I'm aspiring right now to possibly try to like somehow put it in a contained way. Like this is if there was my philosophy, this is it. So here's a introductory improvised summary of where that is right now, at least a part of it. I'm really focusing on how crucial it is for us to do the thing that we are located, situated best to do from a place of abundance, which is about strengths and flows and talents, reinforced and like informed by all of the resources that we have. That's cultural, that is traditional, that's material, all the things going into it. I believe that if we have this scope of abundance, of what is truly available to us on a collective level when we all can align ourselves in the space that we are appropriately situated to do our most with. So much can happen, but I worry that even that can feel a little loose over
Abstract.
like actually just like over optimistic because people could be like I'm doing my thing, I'm aligned with what I'm doing, and that could still lead us straight down a tunnel towards like totalitarianism. So, forevermore, let it be known. I don't ever want to leave a conversation, a room, or a space without insisting that we do everything in our power to operate with a clear, conscious knowing of the backdrop behind us, which to me is that it should be for liberation, for freedom for all, because you can put all your magic talents and medicine towards helping people become healthy Nazis. And like that fundamentally doesn't work for me. So I think that why like the liberation as local work that I've been doing is so important is because week after week, day after day, I am constantly reminding myself of like, this could be so dangerous if people learn certain practices or techniques or traditions and then embody that in a lifestyle and feel grounded in meaning and purpose because of it, without having the critical quality of saying, and to what end, from what backdrop is this operating in? So everything for me needs to be situated in a project of the collective good, for collective liberation, for collective freedom, and that necessitates also our own constant critical reflection and evaluation of what we're doing. You can be doing your thing, just do it for the good of everyone and others and the planet, like do it, but not for capitalist ends. Do it for like something that actually we can stay grounded to, from a place of like anti-fascism and liberation. It's too easy to get swept up as like, I'm doing my thing and I'm doing my best and look at how lucrative or productive or like flourishing this all is, without having the critical component like, oh my God, no, we can't lose sight of like the larger issues. So that's a pretty heavy worry that I have right now, as people get more and more overwhelmed by the conditions that we're living in, that we can focus on our local spheres of influence, but that cannot become an insular bubble that protects us from our responsibility to actually be doing what we can where we have power and influence for the greater good, not just to survive in a way that maybe inadvertently or unintentionally is actually perpetuating some of the conditions that are actually the most devastating that we're navigating through right now and living through. So I just had to, end on that.
Yeah, yes. Yes, yes.
Just gonna, well, now we did that again.
Yes.
It's just dangerous. I think we could get really lost in our desperate efforts to survive um, the conditions and the times that we're in. It's too tempting, and I think probably soothing for many people to feel like if you just do the thing that you are best situated to do, then that's enough. And it is, with the caveat, as long as you're doing it for the greater good, for collective liberation, to open up more freedom for more people, and not like turning away from a real critical investigation of our own contribution to these things that are requiring our utmost responsibility and responsiveness. So yeah, do your thing, but do it for the good of all. And I think we all need training on that. That's why I think we need to be like, we need support. We need communal spaces and relationships that help us know what that means, where that puts us, how we actually are located in that. I don't think we all need to figure it out on our own, and I don't ever think anybody needs to figure anything out on their own, ever. So that's just one thing. I guess you know what? I'm going to end this with one more like point. I believe this is why Bell Hooks's work is so powerful right now, because people have needed the definition of love. I think what I'm trying to do, because it reflects my own learning, is like provide more of like the definition and then the substance, those like 70 indexable qualities, practices of ways to embody liberation, because we can talk about it, but if we don't know what we mean when we say liberation, it's not going to make sense. And I think that's what Bell Hooks was doing, which is like everybody talks about love, but if we don't know what we're talking about when we say love, what the fuck are we doing? Um, and why Bell Hooks and her work is so powerful, specifically on love, and why I've adopted even her definition, is because it's not just this elevation of love as a concept, as a four-letter word that people put everywhere from a card to, the values of your mission statement in your organization. But there's a specific end. And I always emphasize that love is not the abstract concept or value that we just say, love and light, everybody needs to love. No, you love for a purpose. And for Bell Hooks, the purpose is the spiritual development of oneself for another. Why I am really explicit about that is that the love is for healing, transformation, and liberation. If it's not for those things, then maybe we can, expand it out a little bit more. But love for the sake of love is far too vague and undefined. Anybody could say, I'm going to murder a whole community of people motivated by love. Like, it's too dangerous to not have the clarity of that backdrop in the context that we need to be situating ourselves and very like clear-eyed, eyes wide open, knowing that. So that's just something that's like weighing super heavy on my heart right now. And I think as we continue to move through, the historical moment that we're in, I feel like it'll become ever more pressing for people to be able to distinguish those notions and competing perspectives. Because this is a recommendation. It's a book. I'm glad I can plug it. Naomi Klein's Mirror World or Doppelganger, where she's talking about the mirror world. It's a very long book, so it's hefty. But Doppelganger, I think Naomi Klein does a really, really great job of describing like the sort of epistemological nightmare that we're in, where one side we could say is progressive and good and for the sake of like continuing to exist on this planet as a collective. But that can be parroted, or like the ventriloquism of co-opting certain things can become just the same. And now people are having a hard time differentiating between what is like the upside down is another way of thinking about that, or so I just think we have to be extra, extra sharp and clear and consistent with grounding ourselves of like the purpose for what we're doing, so it doesn't get co-opted, even our own kind of projects that we assume for ourselves.
Well, with the nod to sharpness and clarity, we are at full circle to the fact that my video is blurry, and I am here with you as a clarifying, focusing counterpoint and force. I am feeling also not being able to leave this space without a nod to humility and wonder and mystery, and the sense of David Dean saying in some kind of a way what I read and how I read loving your neighbor as yourself and what that means, and then loving God with your whole heart as the first commandment and what that means, as being one of the most dangerous statements you could make because it allows you to disregard potentially, or one of the most liberating statements you could make, because to me, in the Jean-Luc Marion, who David Dean introduced me to, who spells God with a 0 to remind us that what you call God is a word, and it actually is signifying something that transcends our capacity to understand. That to me is the great like humility piece of staying open and aware, of being like, when this pops up, what is this? So it's like there's an you could say an agility, but I want to say more of like a embodied, situated humility in our ongoing clarity and crispness, not just in our video feeds. That's a shitty metaphor, but it's kind of funny. In our like actual like speaking, living, doing our work in a way that it isn't co-opted as in the way that you just mentioned. Wild times, Cori. Thank you.
Yeah. If I can add one last thing, because I've been just trying to follow along with some of David Dean's stuff lately. The stuff on like the way that he's referring to God and the way that you're talking about it with Jean-Luc Marion with the 0. And I'm super intrigued by even his like push right now of like, you cannot be active in the stock market if you are truly acting as a Christian. I think is really powerful. And so I want to go back to Jessica's like earlier question about like practical philosophy, practical wisdom, because I've recently been posed with the question of like, what's the difference between this and spirituality? And Bell Hooks' definition of love, has like the will to extend oneself for the purpose of nurturing one's own or another's spiritual development. And I'm kind of avoiding the language of spirituality by putting different words in that definition. But it doesn't mean that I don't resonate with this notion of spirituality in the sense of, when I think of spiritual practice, to me, spiritual practice, we could even at this point say, a certain brand of philosophical practice, is the effort to become more aligned in our embodied ways of being that are aligned with our values, like the things that we are trying to really be and become and uphold. So in that way, I think that's why so much of David Dean's work really resonates, because it's coming from a place of like profound want and commitment to be aligned in Christian values. And even though that doesn't, like, fundamentally we go like, can't go there with you, there's something that I think is a good kind of mirroring where it's like, but I also believe that we have the major responsibility to practice and live as much as we can to be forever more embodied in the values that we truly believe in and uphold. And that is that kind of like clarifying lens that I think we have to be able to hold on to so that we don't get lost or misled in our efforts that could become co-opted, or otherwise we could become sort of party to the things that we don't want to do. And it's, I'm not saying it's easy. It's not easy to like extricate oneself from the conditions that we're in. That's why I think like the notion of being truly Christian and not in the stock market is going to ruffle some feathers. I love it. But like there, there's still the commitment to name and identify where those inconsistencies really are so that we can have that clarifying lens, if nothing else. Maybe the clarifying lens is like right there akin with the radical imagination part. So we don't have a failure of imagination. It's not a failure of our vision and seeing what is actually right in front of us or what we're doing. That's my last thing. I will stop now.
Oh, yeah. And the crowd goes wild, not because you're stopping talking, but because it was a great because it was a great that was wonderful. Absolutely wonderful. I feel nourished and nurtured.
Yeah. Thank you for the invitation to join me in this space. I truly love our conversation so much. I always do. You're such such a good friend. Thank you for giving me space to share more about what I'm doing too. That means a lot right now as I'm in this place of kind of transition.
Yeah, and I
Always in transition.
will say call to action for people that want to follow your work. You have a Substack and everything is linked on your Substack.
I would actually prefer to say I have a website because I just put
Amazing.
so much effort into this website. So CoriWong.com is my website, and you can find the links to my Substack there. You can also go to the page Love an Artist, which has many options for how you can support my work. And I welcome any and all support in many different forms. Yep, CoriWong.com. Thanks.
Beautiful. And I think moving forward, the whole power literacy piece and improving people's capacity to, I saw a really compelling claim that if we can't identify power in the Nietzschean will to power sense in the world as the world
Mhm.
as will to power, that we are stunted in our own
Yeah.
power as well. That the ability to
Oh,
read
definitely.
power is one and the same as being our capacity to be more powerful in our ability to love ourselves and another, which I
Mhm.
find really powerful. I mean, powerful. It's compelling way to frame this. That maybe there's some future collaborations possible. I got 2.5 pages of notes.
Yeah,
Brilliant.
my stand-up philosophy series that I'm doing right now, the first ever attempt, is on knowledge, ethics, and power. So the one next month will be on power with the title "More Power, Please."
There we go. And my stand up routine I'm working on is around teaching and attention because it's hilarious.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay.
Um,
Thank you.
bye, Cori. Hope you all go to CoriWong.com. Thanks. I'm glad to introduce you to everyone that is watching. Thanks, Cori.
Thank you. Bye.
Peace.